My name is Mette Morsing, and I'm head of PRIME, Principles for Responsible Management Education at the UN Global Compact. And it is a true privilege for me today to welcome this PRIME panel at the UN Global Compact's Global Impact Forum related to the UN General Assembly. So what we're going to talk about today is new aspirations for global impact, the SDG education and training of future finance professionals. And over the past decade, asset managers have faced increased pressure to account for sustainability when managing their portfolios. In the US, asset managers consider ESG criteria across $11.6 trillion in assets. To integrate the ESG, finance professionals interact with companies to foster more sustainability practices. But what we are interested in this panel is that many of these investors receive only little training on these topics in business schools. They are learning on the job, so to speak, how to integrate ESGs. So today we have invited an expert panel of professors of finance to discuss this particular issue with us, how to bring the ESG and the SDG agenda into the classroom of finance. And I've invited Professor of Business and Society at Copenhagen Business School, Andreas Rasche, to chair this session with me. And I cannot imagine a more timely or relevant panel to have on the UN Global Compact's Global Impact Forum, as yesterday we launched the CFO Principles for Integrated SDG Investments, as you may have read in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere. So Andreas Rasche, please, thank you very much for agreeing to chair this session with us. Andreas, you have researched on sustainable finance in the classroom and came up with some very interesting findings that you may want to get us all acquainted a little bit more with as we move on over the next hour. And you also recently, or you are actually going on Thursday to launch your new book on sustainable investments published at Routledge with Georg Kell, the former director of the UN Global Compact, and Herman Brill, also working for the UN. So please, Andreas Rasche, thank you very much for chairing, and take it on from here.
Thank you very much indeed, Mette. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you. Welcome, everybody. And most of all, welcome to our panel, which I want to briefly introduce. Before we actually start, and as Mette said, I will weave in my own thoughts and my own experiences as we go along, also to supplement what the panel says. First of all, it's my pleasure to have Dave Chen here from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern, who is a professor of finance there. Dave, very warm welcome to you. Then we have Costanza Consulangi from the University of Siena in Italy, who's an associate professor of corporate finance. Very warm welcome to you, Costanza. And we also have Basma Majerbi from the Gustafson School of Business at the University of Victoria in Canada. Again, a professor of finance. Very warm welcome to you as well, Basma. Georg Kell sends his apologies. He can't be with us here today. But as Mette just said, Georg and I, we are brothers in arms. We just published a book together. So I'm pretty sure I can also bring in some of his perspectives here, as I'm familiar with his thinking on these subject matters. Let's get us started. And my question to the panel, the first question would be, what do you consider the most important skills that are needed for future finance professionals to advance the ESG and sustainable development agenda? So what are the most important skills here? And ladies first, I give the word first to Costanza.
Okay, thank you, Andreas, and good afternoon, good late afternoon, everybody, as I'm based in Italy, and here is 6 p.m. Well, it's a very good question. Thanks for the question. I think that, very briefly, using my 2 minutes available, the two most important skills that need to be transferred to future ESG professionals and finance students is the concept of ESG materiality. It is something that is essential. So, and moreover, which are the transmission channels through which ESG performance and so non-financial issues are transferred into fair value, into economic value. So this is the background that it is necessary to provide to our students, to our finance students.
All right, thank you very much. That I think provides a great baseline for further comments. So I give the word to Basma, please. Your reflections on what skills do we actually need?
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to take part in this really important and timely discussion, as mentioned by Meta. I'd like maybe to start with a broad take on this for finance professionals more generally. And I think there's a recognition that there's a rapid shift of skills that is needed. And that includes definitely stronger training in sustainable finance. I think we all agree on this, and it's something that is critical for us as teachers, but also even for finance professionals who are out there and doing other jobs, whether in asset management or corporate finance, that they need to really reskill themselves in this field. I agree with Constanza in terms of the concept of materiality is really important. But I think before we even get to those technical things, I think it's really important to have a shift in mindset. And this is, from talking with many finance professors, I know that it's still, we're not there yet. And we need to do a good job with our students and even in the profession to shift a little bit the mindset and understand that, sustainable finance creates long-term value for business. It's not just a trade-off, because we're still a little bit stuck in the trade-off mentality. It's really an important first skill to have to believe that sustainable finance really creates long-term value, and that to ensure growth and prosperity in any business or for managing portfolios, this is really highly dependent on an interconnected, healthy planet and healthy society. So the ESG, the E and the G and the S are really, really important. I also think that it's important to have a better understanding of these global societal challenges. Meta mentioned earlier the CFO initiative, which is a great initiative. And if you read those principles, definitely you can see very evidently that anyone working in a corporation in a finance job, they need to really learn more about what are these SDGs and how our activities in the company can have a positive or negative impact. So if the company commits to aligning with the SDGs, it's not easy for those who have been trained, to just use analytical and financial models that look at risk and return from a completely different perspective to integrate these big societal challenges into the equation. And I think, having awareness of these societal challenges are important, but coming back to the skills, I think we need to introduce a little bit in our foundation courses in finance, an introduction to some of the tools and models and frameworks that exist already and that are used in other fields that could be extremely important for our students as future finance professionals. And then finally, I think because of the complexity and the interconnectedness of all of these environmental and social issues, one critical skill, in my opinion, is really to have foster some critical thinking and a little bit more of system level thinking to be able to operate in this highly uncertain environment. So I'm going to stop here.
Great, thank you, Basma, and of course the systems level thinking. I think we will come back to that later because it is really a core skill. So I pass it over to Dave. Dave, you have a lot of experience teaching finance and sustainable finance at Stanford. So we are very keen to hear your reflections on skills.
Thank you. I think you need to answer this question within the backdrop of what's happening in the capital markets. I would say that before 5 years ago, much of the conversation about sustainable finance and impact investing and even the climate implications of the capital markets, a lot of that was actually, I think, done in an abstract, and it was in a very conceptual phase of the market. So in other words, dialogue was appropriate. But beginning about 5 years ago and accelerating to today, the capital markets have moved into product. So they've moved into a stage where it's now about portfolio development and the actual movement of capital into these strategies. And I think that differentiation is very important. We've gone from basically reports to now portfolio construction. And so my comments really reflect that's where the market is, and therefore what do you have to equip your students to be able to do. So today we're taking things like ESG and sustainability and climate and embedding them across portfolios, across the asset classes that our investors hold. That's number one. Number two, you're even now going to very focused strategies where sustainability is now the basis of the investment. So one is about integration, the other one is actually the focus of it. And then the third, and you can see this now, especially, for example, and I'll pick on a sector, the oil and gas sector, where the fundamental issue of the risk analysis of the portfolio now is critically important. So what's the risk that's embedded within my portfolio, and what's the opportunity set that's embedded in my portfolio? When you look at all three levels of that, these are now all about the selection, the integration, the implementation of portfolios. And therefore, when we talk about student skills, we have to do it in that context. So it's really moved from theoretical and discussion to execution. So I look at two things that are critically important to student education at this point, and that goes for continuing ed as well as for our MBA full-time students. And that's number one, an appreciation for the structuring of the assets, the structuring of sustainable finance at the structuring level. I almost call it a mechanics skill. What's the capital stack look like? How do you integrate carbon? How do you integrate the various aspects of whether it's renewable energy finance, whether it's all the way through then to low-income housing? These are now all issues of understanding how are deals and portfolios actually constructed, how are deals actually structured. So in some ways, it's the spreadsheet skills of being able to assemble a financing within those kinds of transactions. We've moved to that level. And if a student is still at the conceptual phase, they can't actually dive in with expertise into that area. The second major skill, and I think that both Costanza and Basma mentioned it, but the second set of skills is the word risk is no longer an art form. The word climate risk is now a quantitative metric, and it's in fact what things like TCFD drive us to do. But we need to train the students in, I would call it the risk modeling of ESG and climate, the economics of sustainability. What are the economics of reuse? What are the economics once you factor in things like externalities? These are all now starting to take conceptual things and quantify those, and that skill of being able to understand the quantification models. The difficulty of both these sets, both the skills required in structuring as well as the skills in effectively risk modeling and sustainability pricing, we're developing the tools and theories of these at the very same time that we're executing portfolios. And so that's part of the difficulty for teaching in this field right now, is that you have to have both at the same time. So part of the reason that, and I'll talk a little bit about something that we've done, and there's various members of possibly the audience that are part of this, but about 3-4 years ago, we created the Impact and Sustainable Finance Faculty Consortium specifically to address this. And it was a clarion call to the faculty globally that are teaching these classes that it's the time to get together and be, I'll call it the huddled mass, which is to help each other with what theories are we using in our classes, what cases are we using in our classes, what experiential exercises, and what data-driven frameworks are being taught in our class. So today we're now over 200 faculty members. I think the count is 215 across 106 universities in 27 countries, all meeting once a year in a workshop to exchange this, precisely because we're obligated to train our students and we're still developing the tools as we speak. So I'd invite everybody that is faculty to participate in this very open exchange of our methodologies.
Great, thank you, Dave. Maybe you can post the link or the precise name of the network here in the chat function. I think that would probably help the audience. I appreciate your answers. I think they show the richness of the debate also. They show that, Basma, you emphasized the shift in mindset. Dave emphasized also the more technical, I think you call it spreadsheet skills, which I think is great. and of course, this is what is needed. And Constanza, you emphasized what is at the core of this, the materiality debate, right? I mean, really decide on what issues matter in the first place, because if we don't know this, it will be difficult to make any progress. I myself, I think, of course, I agree with all this. The mindset probably is the one I think we're struggling with most. I just had a conversation with a colleague the other day around Andrew Lowe's. You might know the book Adaptive Markets, the Adaptive Market Hypothesis. And of course, if you talk to people about this kind of things, you see different paradigms really coming together and needing discussions. I want to continue our discussion, and I want to pose the next question to Constanza. Now that we have discussed the skills, do you believe that business schools actually do enough for us, our students, to have these skills? Do we do sufficient work here?
Well, thanks for this great question, Andres. Well, my answer is no. No, I think that as a university level, at the business school level, we're still not doing enough. But I'm a bit, I would say that I'm quite optimistic about this. I share my experience with the MS in Finance at the University of Siena here. I teach corporate evaluation at the MS in Finance. And of course, my syllabus is part into traditional corporate evaluation techniques from discounted cash flow methodology, the traditional. There is a part of the course, which is around 1/3 of the course, that is devoted to putting sustainability into evaluation. So there is not, I do not teach a course on sustainable finance, but I include sustainability within the corporate evaluation framework. And this is what I'm doing as a member of the steering committee of the MS in Finance. I'm inviting my colleagues to do exactly what Basma and Dave said before. So we need a change in mindset of students. So integrating sustainability in the traditional asset price model, we know now, as Dave said, for example, talking about climate risk. Then when I talk in terms of risk return, within risk, there is not only the financial, the traditional financial risk, but there are these new, let's say, risks that started to be non-financial, but they are now becoming financial. We have robust models on the, for example, for the climate risk. But I'm sure that in the near future, we will need to work on the S of the ESG, of the social risk and inequality. For example, the financial risk deriving from inequality. In general, I think that more than before, we cannot teach and transfer and provide skills to our finance students without a strong connection with the investment world. because this is the case where the investment world, the real world, and not the academia, comes first. You know, we need to observe, we need to learn what and to see what's happening in the investment arena, and then enhance and reinforce the skills for our students. That this sustainability must become a new lens, you know, a new lens in which using the Amazon Finance in my university should use this lens. It's not just only me that have this new lens, add the lens to the corporate evaluation course, but also my colleagues taking risk management and so forth. This is essential, what I think.
And Andreas, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I wanted to say we have a bit of an echo, actually. At least I do. So I think we should all just make sure that we're always muted whenever we are not talking. Thank you, Costanza. I think these are great reflections. Also, of course, on the barriers that exist to kind of implement that. Basma, how do we engage students more? Engagement, I think, is key. I think we've heard that already from quite a lot of voices here in this panel. How do we engage students more to become part of the debate? And maybe also a related question: do students actually want to be engaged?
Absolutely. I think students, really want to be engaged for sure, and they're actually pushing us more and more to do so. The nice thing about about students, I think the younger ones that I'm seeing recently, they actually are very passionate about a lot of issues that they care about, and many of them are social issues, and environmental issue, of course, are at the top. And they want to see that reflected in the classroom discussion, right? You cannot teach and in isolation of all these things that the students care about. And if you don't integrate these into your teaching, obviously we're not doing a good job at engaging the students and having them participate in that debate. I think, going back to another example, about student engagement in finance. I think you all probably have it also in your universities. For example, many students have been quite active in the divestment movement, right? So not just business students, but all over the universities. And they managed here in Canada, for example, a number of universities committed to decarbonizing their portfolio. And that is partly thanks to the activism and the engagement of students in these issues, that they think, the way you use your money really matters. So they are already highly engaged in these issues. Recently, I think there's been a group of students in Montreal, the business school, I think it's at McGill and others, they actually wrote a manifesto asking the business school to include sustainability in finance classes, and they're not happy that they are still being taught, finance without any mention to sustainability. So that's really an important part. But going back to Costanza's, remarks about we're not doing enough, I think one way to improve on our performance in terms as business schools and do better in terms of integrating sustainability in finance classes is to create a conducive environment for that at the entire school level. I think it's not fair to require only finance professors to to integrate sustainability, because many of them have not been trained in that field, or as Dave mentioned, the models are still being developed as we are teaching. One thing for us, for example, at Staff School of Business, I've been really lucky, and I must say that I started doing this long time ago, like for over 10 years now. I include sustainability in core finance classes, and these are concepts that I don't find in any of the textbooks that I use. And the reason I do that is because at the top, at the business school, we put sustainability as a core, and we don't really use it as a fringe or as a specialty. It's something that we try very hard to integrate across all the classes that we teach, whether it's marketing, whether it's strategy, whether it's organizational behavior, in everything we do. So by design, it creates an incentive for everyone to really try to integrate sustainability, and also it facilitates this mindset shift, right, by students. So when they come to finance classes, they are actually ready to learn how we can use finance for good, right? You don't have to spend time trying to convince them that there is no trade-off between maximizing return and also having a positive impact on society or the environment. So that's really important. And the other thing that is critical, I think, particularly for finance professors, is to try to integrate a little bit what we do with other areas in the business school, integrate, and I'll talk a little bit more to that later, but we need to have a little bit more integration across the different management discipline, because there's a lot that we can learn from people teaching sustainability or strategy or, marketing from. So to go back to Costanza's point of, having a different lens, you need this integration and you need to have sustainability at the core.
Andreas, I think it's back to you.
Andreas, I think you are muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, because I cannot hear you.
But maybe,
can you take over for a moment, and I will try to log in again.
Okay, maybe I could then take the opportunity here. Can you hear me now? Yes, maybe I would take the opportunity here now and ask, the panel. I'm so happy to have 3 professors of finance in the room discussing these issues, and of course, only recently came to my awareness, Dave, you are the great network where I know Basma and Constanza, you're also part of this network. So I would like to explore more further, how can we as PRIME, Principles for Responsible Management Education, with the 800 plus schools that we have as signatories around the world, and you're 3 of them, fortunately, how can we sort of use that platform, if you have any reflections on that, to sort of help other professors of finance and beyond to get interested and to find more, sort of helpful advice or consultation for how to move on with this agenda. Because I also hear many professors of finance talk about, we don't have enough data to teach this, we don't have enough data yet to do research, in the methods and that we are trained to do. So that's also an issue that I hear. I would like to sort of invite your reflections on this.
Speaking as one of the founders of the consortium, what I would say is that we were very focused on the classroom, and that is what are the tools that a professor needs to have in the classroom. We also spotted something that I think is symptomatic of where we are in this phase, and that is that, by and large, if you look at it 10 years ago or 5 years ago, most of these classes, regardless of the institution, were taught by adjuncts. And today, I think that what is incredibly encouraging is that we're able to bring into the classroom the combination of tenure track, academic and research-driven professors with practitioners. And so in general, this is being up-leveled, I would say, over the course of the last few years. And I think that bringing together is critically important. The other thing that I think is also happening is that the world of impact, which had its genesis in oftentimes microfinance or social enterprise venture capital, is now starting to be brought and surfaced with the conversations around ESG, which tend to be about the other big blocks that are in the asset allocation model, the way we invest. And so I think the conversation has reached a new level of importance. And so when we talk about the consortium's primary objective was not necessarily research. It was actually the classroom and the focus on that. And so a lot of our workshops are not about trading stories, but about the tools that we're actually using and be able to select what frameworks are we using and the discovery of, I'll call it quantitative and qualitative tools that we're now bringing in. And that goes all the way from experiential exercises all the way through to the actual cases that we're using. And so I would say we're loosely partnered with other consortiums that are much more research focused, and they're bringing their faculty together, and we're making sure that we're intersecting, talking. But the consortium that we created, the Impact and Sustainable Faculty Consortium, is really about the classroom. All right.
Yeah. But so I would like, but thank you for this, Dave. I would like to ask Constanze and Basma, I mean, to what extent does this research matter for, I was told by some professor of finance colleagues that only 5 years ago, the big journals started to take an interest in sustainability, and not 6 years ago, but 5 years ago was the first sort of article in these A+, 4-star plus journal actually published on these issues. So to what extent does that matter in the classroom? The research sort of teaching gap or link I'm sort of trying to explore a little bit with you here.
Well, it is true that in general, you cannot disconnect your research activity, your connection with the world, with the real world, from teaching. You bring everything into class. I think that this is even more important in finance in these days, in these years, because it is so new. You know, the approach is so new. What you said, Matt, was absolutely right. You know, until 5 years ago, if you submitted a paper talking about sustainability, sustainable finance in a traditional mainstream finance journal, you would have seen your paper rejected with a desk rejection. You know, this is not finance. This is finance at all. And that's what a lot the fact that professionals must be prepared and skilled, first of all, as finance professionals. The skill for this kind of, first of all, finance skills, quantitative skills, math skills, econometric, and all the quant skills. So the normal, let's say, at the lens of sustainability. And when you add the lens of sustainability, you need the ability, saying before, you know, a thinking approach. You know, you must have a systemic thinking approach. You must have to understand how to measure the non-financial issues in order to put them within the framework. So I think that the signal that is provided by the top-rated finance journal is this. So ESG investment, ESG finance is now likely recognized and information field. But first of all, it is finance, because this is something they knows my position of this, because otherwise is that a second level kind of finance, and this is not. I hopefully know when, probably to not the near future, there will be no organized panel like this, because sustainability, the link to the SDGs and the contribution to the goals is something which is embedded in our. We must be very, very careful.
But thank you for this comment, Constance. And I think someone in the chat here is also mentioning the other professional, the Global Research Alliance for Sustainable Finance, invest in the GRASFI community that all three of you are also doing. I just want to welcome Andreas back here again. Good to have you back. To you, Andreas.
Meta,
yeah, and if I may add, just on the question about research, I think it's really question, but fortunately there are some really positive trends now, as mentioned by Costanza, and we've seen also even like special issues of, let's say, RFS on climate risk and all these kind of things. So that's a really positive trend. In Canada also recently last year we launched Queen's University took the initiative to coordinate work for finance professors within Canada, so the Canadian Sustainable Finance Network, and we're organizing a first conference in October. So that's going to push more research and collaboration around sustainable finance. But I think we should also recognize that teaching sustainable finance informs our research. And for me personally, that's how, learning from practitioners, feeling the need to integrate a lot of sustainable finance or impact investing topics into our classroom. We do it for teaching because we think we need to skill our students to make them ready for the future of finance professionals. But at the same time, that gives us a lot of ideas for research and hopefully, stimulates a little bit more. And as more data become available, we become better at producing research on the topic. My only concern is that there is too much focus now on ESG, and let's focus on impact, right? I mean, how do we actually shift the mentality towards using finance, not because these ESG issues are material for financial performance, but they are also another shift of mindset that we need to actually contribute positively to solving societal issues. We cannot ignore that, and we have to do our part to actually have a positive impact. So to me, impact investing is an area of very big promise, but it is still receiving very little attention in terms of research. It's still within the sustainable finance field. There are some that are very hot topics and others that are receiving less attention.
Dave,
could I maybe interrupt and as well and just chime into that? I think that there are, I'd like to maybe give a couple of tangible examples, and 5 years in this field is now a lifetime because of one of the other prizes in this area has always been the Moskowitz Prize, which really recognizes peer review research in this general topic. I would tell you that last year there were 40 submissions, and historically it's probably been close to that number. This year there were 100 plus submissions, which says that the number of professors or postdocs that are engaging in this kind of work now to seriously advance the area, but also because we must see that the incentives are there in order to be able to do this, to get that kind of attention. So not only is it important, but potentially departments are now recognizing this. These are all incredibly powerful signs. Another example, and I hate to say it this way, but a lot of finance is historic. It's stuck in the way that we've been thinking, and we're now challenged with very different thought processes. And I'll give you two tangible examples that I think finance faculty are not equipped to deal with, and yet there's a screaming need for them to opine. So if you look at BlackRock and ask, why are they so interested in climate and long-termism and ESG? It could be that at $5-6 trillion of assets, that it's impossible for them to beat the market. And if the world goes to hell, the index will go to hell. And so Hiro Mizuno at GPIF coined the phrase a year or two ago, quality beta. In other words, beta is gain, and it is returns, but it's the returns of the market. And if the world now has 25 or so entities that are all in the $500 billion to $1 trillion plus weight class, which means that statistically it's impossible to beat the market, then the idea of can they influence the directionality of beta, all right, and the recognition that if the market goes into trouble, climate change, you can see the degradation of value in California and the west of the United States with the fires this last few weeks. If the world's systematic risk is increasing, then the market will respond. And if 25 investors in the world, investment managers or asset owners in the world, now control upwards of 25% of the global value, what does that mean? That they can skew the direction of quality beta? And what does that mean when you think about that level of concentration of basically folks that have to be representations of the market? So that's a way of thinking that was never contemplated 10 years ago. All right, and I'm absolutely convinced that one of the reasons that BlackRock is so focused on this is because of their situation. And it's the same reason that GPIF at $1 trillion entered into this conversation, not benignly, but with the understanding that if climate is a risk in the foreseeable future, then the entire market will be dragged down, and the entire risk portfolio and ability to manage that goes with the directionality of the market.
All right.
That's an incredible. So when Bosma talks about impact, we historically have used the word impact to mean microfinance and little things, all right, and venture funds. What if now the word impact and being intentionally impactful now is at the largest portfolios in the world? If I think about this in another way, the whole oil and gas industry, because the terminal value of the entire industry has been written to zero. What does that mean that an entire industry is now being valued for cash flows? What does that mean in terms of the ability to now actually use those business models and the cash models for impact? Because the market has written them off. All right. So there's a number of very recent phenomenons that I think are really important here to be thinking about when we use the word impact, because historically it has been thought of in the context of small is beautiful, and it's been thought of in the context of again, the social enterprise. But it's time to really think about this, and both professors have mentioned this, the integration of this thinking, but the situation is evolving so fast that we're not keeping up with the implication of some of these trends that are impacting us.
These are great remarks, Dave, and I think you point us towards the timeliness of the debate and how swift things are actually changing in this field, that it is sometimes very difficult also to keep up with these developments in the classroom. So that's why I would like to ask, I mean, you're all three of you, you're teachers, right? I mean, you're professors, and can you share some inspirational experiences, maybe by people who you know or by yourself, on how do we engage ESG much better into the classroom? What do you do to really engage students in the classroom?
You're asking me, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that sounds good. I can give a couple of examples from my own experience, and both examples actually are based on the concept that we need to break the silos as finance teachers. We need to really reach out and work with other people in the business school. So in my case, I a portfolio assignment with my core MBA finance class, and I've done it alone for a while, but then I actually started doing it with a sustainability professor. And so it's an integrated assignment, and it's very practical in the sense that that students actually use a real-time platform to create a portfolio using ESG integration. And when I started doing this with my colleague who teaches sustainability, it took it to a whole new level, because it just really integrates exactly all these concepts of materiality that they talk about in the sustainability class, and then they come to finance and I do other things with them. So it's been hugely successful, and students just love it because it's hands-on, it's experiential, and they have to think really hard. They are exposed to all these different metrics of ESG. They're confused, just like, professionals are. How do we deal with this? They come to class, discuss it. So it's been really, really nice. And this year in our new MBA in Sustainable Innovation, we're expanding this assignment to actually integrate through 6 courses. So that includes accounting, finance, designing organizations, so it talks about governance, economics. So it's very highly integrated, and students know they will get grades for this particular finance assignment in all of their 6 courses across 2 blocks. So highly integrated. Another example that I do is with my Master of Global Business students. And again, I try to be really practical, and I also collaborate with colleagues teaching supply chain and strategy. And we design assignments together. For example, last year, we asked students to work on a company from the Climate 100 list, which is a list where investors are engaged with these companies to improve their climate and environmental and records. And so students learn about that, but they also think about what do these companies need to do in terms of reducing their carbon, right? Meeting this expectation. And so they see that in supply chain, they see that from a strategic perspective. It just gives them a really holistic view. It's just not just think narrowly about finance. And then finally, one quick example. When our university decided to dedicate 25% of an endowment to impact investing, I worked with the Treasury Department to have our students pitch impact funds. So they have to actually learn about impact investing. Then they have to think about which funds will align with the university's objective, not only financially, but also how do they connect with the strategic framework of the university, what impact thesis they want to make. And in the process, they learn a lot about these things. So just make it very action-oriented, as well as integrating with other courses, I think is very inspiring for the students.
Great, thank you, Basma. And just as being a professor of sustainability myself, I can say we surely appreciate it to collaborate with colleagues in accounting and finance on these topics. Costanza, any reflections on inspirational practices from you? You're muted. Costanza, you're still muted.
No? Not hear you, Costanza.
Costanza, we cannot hear you. Maybe you have the same problem as I did before. Okay, so I give Dave the question then, and maybe Costanza tries to fix the problem, the tech problem on her side. Dave, any inspirational practices? I'm sure you have many.
Yeah, I mean, look, this area is really attractive and very sexy right now for the students, and so we do things like, for example, the Kellogg Morgan Stanley Sustainable Investing Challenge, which challenges students, finance students, to create investment products and use finance as the source of innovation. All of us are coming up with innovative ways of thinking about experiential exercises within our classes. We're finding lots of ways to engage the students. And I don't think that's, in some ways we're now speaking to the converted. And so I will tell you that one of the things that I'm challenged with is engaging students on a much less sexy topic. And that's a big challenge because we all like to run to the new and the bold. Look, and I think the writing is on the wall, and I want to expose our students to this, and that is that if you interviewed the most important investors in the world for years and years now, they've sounded like Milton Friedman. All right, but there's something that's changed in the last year or two. The folks that are talking about these concepts, of the corporation, whether it's the obligation of capital, are no longer the fringe. They're now Ray Dalio. All right, they're Bob Litterman. All right, who invented risk management at the chief risk officer kind of function. They're people like Hiro Mizuno, Ben Meng. They're guys like Jeff Ubben, all right, at Value Act that are now talking about these things in not through their philanthropic voice, but through the core of what they do. And this level of engagement is what I'm actually most excited to do. And it's not sexy because it's the big capital blocks. But it's to expose, in fact, the students that are not compelled by sustainability, that want to go off and work for a hedge fund or want to go into investment banking, that in fact, these issues are now impacting and in fact are tools of great power and leverage that you get to be an expert on. And that to me is the exciting part about engagement. But that forces me to think about marketing. How do I think about engaging the students in something that I personally think is incredibly powerful and is a sea change of attitude by the most important mega investors in the world? And how do we engage them to understand that there is great power in doing small things that grow big, but there's also great power in leveraging the tools that are huge to actually create the levers that are necessary to solve our social and climate problems. And what's exciting is that there are different strokes for different folks, and you've got now the opportunity to present students with both ends of the capital markets. And to me, that's perhaps the exciting challenge that we as educators get to bring to our students.
All right, great, Dave. Thank you. I feel already the energy coming across here. So I bet your students are very engaged. Costanza, any reflections? Do the technical problems have been resolved? Apparently not. No, we don't hear you. Sorry. So very sorry about this. I'm not sure what exactly the problem is. As indicated, I had the same problem before. I had to turn down my computer completely and restart it. But then maybe to close to Basma and Dave, and maybe Costanza, maybe you can just answer in the chat if that's possible. A final comment from you on the immediate future. What do you think is the most important thing for us to do now to advance ESG in the finance classroom? Please, a short answer. What do you think is the most important thing that we need to do now immediately? Basma?
I would say to anyone teaching core finance classes, just jump and introduce some of the concepts, even if they're not in your textbook. If you're teaching, for example, bond valuation, which is a basic concept in all core finance classes, why not talk about green bonds, right? I mean, green bonds is the fastest growing market in the world. There's so much innovation there. There's recently, NL issued an SDG aligned bond. What does that mean, right? We can still teach basics like, for example, yields and prices and all these kind of things that we teach in finance, but use it in a context of, for example, a green bond or an SDG aligned bond. Get the students to reflect about why we have this, why the market need those, what are they able to achieve compared to conventional bonds. So, if you're teaching, again, risk and return, you cannot forgo talking about climate risk, right? And if you cannot teach portfolio theory without mentioning, other things that were not traditionally including. I think it's intimidating a little bit to include things that we're not trained in. But if we try and maybe bring guest speakers or work with other colleagues, it can be very rewarding. We can learn ourselves more about these issues and give our students an opportunity to advance and gain some skills.
Great, thank you. Dave, please a short answer, because I promised Mette to hand it back at 55 and we're already a little over.
I think the short answer is that we've won, I think, the hearts and minds momentum of the students. I think it's now time to take the next big step, and it's a big one, and that is to convince our deans and the administration, the chairs of departments, that this is now hitting mainstream, and it's a set of issues that is worth their attention.
Great, thank you. Costanza, are you back? Ooh, Costanza, we can still not hear you. Sorry about that. Sorry, we asked for or I asked for the most important thing in the immediate future to do to advance ESG in the finance classroom, but I hand it back to Mette. Maybe Costanza, if at all possible, you can write something in the chat so that we can have your answer here. Maybe just 1 or 2 sentences on the most immediate and the most important thing that you should be done immediately to incorporate ESG in the finance classroom. Over to you, Mette. Thanks to the panel. It was great to have you here, and I really enjoyed the conversation with colleagues from finance and myself from the sustainability field. So it was really fantastic to have you here.
No, thank you very much, Andreas, and thank you, Dave, Basma, and Constanza, also for being so actively engaged on this agenda in this panel. One of the comments out here in the chat is from Jeremy Bassan. He says, "I think this is already integrated into the classroom as CSR, corporate social responsibility." And Jeremy, I may say that maybe so, but I think it's fair to say there's still a lot of room for improvement, and I think there's still a long way to go. In the research project that I was leading when I was in Stockholm, we definitely found out that there was a way ahead of us in order to have ESG integrated thoroughly into the classroom, what this panel has been talking about and giving so good examples about. So I think this was a wonderful example that you brought in here. It was a wonderful panel, and I really appreciate the engagement, and I hope we can continue the conversation also elsewhere. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you.